Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce, and welcome to the podcast video station that I run. Today's guest is Helena, who is a member of the Pique Resilience Project, which is a loose band of ne'er-do-wells or always do well young women who are seeking to raise awareness around issues of detransition. And last year I went through and I interviewed 4 of them, and Helena was one of those young women, and I wanted to catch back up with her because a part of the possibility of value in this work and doing these interviews is checking in with people at a particular point in history and at a particular point in their lives, and especially with the young people, a lot of things happen and change, and there's a lot of reconfiguration that's going on in a young person's life. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to catch up with Helena and see where she is now in her journey and with regards to the various issues that she's involved with, speaking about and thinking through. And I don't need to say anything else except for I hope you're having a good day, and I hope this satisfies you amply.
I think it was in January last time when the big polar vortex froze over Lake Michigan. I know, it's crazy. So maybe we'll have one. I don't think they're projecting another one this year, but I know last year it was like people were talking about it for a month before it happened. They were like, oh, there's going to be a polar vortex, and then it happened. And like the whole city was shut down.
I spent 5 winters, or 6 winters in Chicago, so I have experience of that wind chill.
It's pretty crazy.
Did you grow up there?
No, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh, okay. And yeah. Chicago, for what drew you there?
Originally, no. It's kind of funny. Originally, because my informed consent clinic was here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm just kind of like, I mean, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. And it just kind of has like this weird association with it of like, I came here for transition. And now that's not relevant to my life anymore. So I definitely don't want to stay here forever, but it is what it is. And I don't hate it. So probably will be leaving when I get an opportunity, but.
Mm-hmm. There's life there though. I mean, culture-wise.
Definitely, but it's very, at least from my perspective, a lot of the cultural aspects are very kind of like taken over by intersectional lefty, like all the art scene is like everyone uses neo-pronouns. It's, I don't know, I just feel like everywhere I go it's like in my face, super in my face. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to interact with the culture here just because of my background, and like I don't know, it's not that I choose my friends based on their politics, but I feel like the odd one out, definitely.
Neo-pronouns meaning with the X's and the Z's and the Y's.
Yeah. Wow. Lots and lots of that.
How do people practically memorize everybody else's unique pronoun signifiers?
Well, technically, you're supposed to go home and practice. So, like, if someone says they use a pronoun that you're unfamiliar with, you're supposed to ask them, how do I use those pronouns? And they're supposed to say, I use Z, Zer. So like, Z went to the store to get Zer chicken stock for Zer recipe. And you're supposed to go home and you're supposed to practice that so you don't mess up the next time you see them.
Who polices everybody else's pronouns? Is there a lot of time spent on like, oh no, they're a Z now, or they're a yaya, you know, or you're just supposed to whistle?
I don't know if there's a lot of time spent per se, but it's just kind of policed by the culture. Like it's just kind of part of the culture now. For example, I was in a coffee shop, I was waiting for my coffee, and they had like some local Chicago magazine, and it wasn't like a social justice or artsy magazine. It was just like a normal Chicago magazine. And like I felt like every other page I turned to was something to do with intersectional like race or gender theory.
Yeah.
So it's very prominent.
So, are you in college right now? Or you're between degrees, I guess.
Yeah, trying to figure it out.
So you kind of grew up with this stuff on the forefront of, I guess, the avant-garde. of this kind of culture. And I think we spoke about your interaction with the trans culture, and I guess this stuff is folded into that. And was it always there? Was it the cool hip thing that you're kind of tired of, or did it just all of a sudden arise around you after the fact?
Well, it's a little bit weird. So when I lived in Ohio, the only place I really interacted with this stuff was online. Like my school it wasn't super conservative, my district, but it also wasn't super liberal. I feel like it was kind of a healthy mix of the two. Like I feel like just the way my school district was run was not on the extreme in either way, and I appreciated that. But definitely a lot of the intersectional theory type stuff was online. And then when I got to Chicago, that was the first time I ever had it so in my face. And I remember realizing that when I came for informed consent, and I just thought to myself, like, wow, I have to move here. It's so amazing. Everyone's so accepting. Everyone's so woke. Oh my God, I have to move here. And then I did, and then I detransitioned.
Do you think that being immersed in that culture kind of sped up or accelerated your change of thought, and then also the detransition too?
I think it sped it up a little bit. Maybe not sped it up, but I distinctly remember like wanting to be friends with all these people and wanting to talk like politics with them because I like doing that, and just it all felt really fake. Like it all felt like you have to follow the script. You can't really have a discussion about what gender is and like kind of the stuff I wanted to talk about. It was very much like you just had to follow your script. And if you didn't agree with it was very like lined out how you were supposed to think. And I remember feeling really like repressed by that. So I stopped seeking out those friends and I started isolating more. And then I turned my back on the trans community before I ended up actually detransitioning for myself. So I kind of just like isolated myself, and I didn't make any attempts to go to like queer groups or queer events or anything like that. I stopped seeking that out. And I think a lot of like my eventual decision to detransition was realizing like this group of people, this ideology was not everything I thought it was going to be. It wasn't like the friendly, accepting bubble that I thought it was. And when I actually interacted with these people on a daily basis, like I had coworkers who were non-binary and blah, blah, blah. And like, despite the fact that we shared this trans identity, I didn't feel like I could actually be friends with them because just something was super fake. And I think that was my first way of seeing through all of it.
Did you see the fakeness in yourself, or a distaste towards the fakeness more?
A distaste towards the fakeness. I don't think I really considered myself as part of the fakes. I kind of considered myself as like a real trans person who isn't like those people. And eventually I stopped believing that way. But at least before I detransitioned, I was just kind of like, oh, I wish I could change the trans community to make them less like that.
Did you have any success, or you just kind of walked away?
I just like walked away and stopped communicating with them at all.
So it's been a year, almost a year since I had you on, and almost a year since you and the other girls of the Pique Resilience Project came out. I guess this is like another coming out that you guys came out. So, how has your view on different trans people changed, or have you had different interactions with a wider variety of people who are in the trans category or identify as trans?
I definitely have. I've gone through a couple of phases so far in kind of the way I think about this stuff since detransitioning. At first, I was definitely more against trans people in transition than I am now. Kind of just like all people who transition are completely delusional. There's absolutely nothing except patriarchy that would ever make you feel that way at all. And the only way to deal with it is to reject patriarchy and to be a gender nonconforming man or woman. And I kind of slowly stopped vibing with like the patriarchy talk, and I kind of like stepped back and I noticed I was getting sucked into another ideological world. And eventually, one person who has been really influential is Mars of the podcast. He reached out to me because I tweeted Calvin Guerra. Calvin Guerra called me a TERF. I responded to Calvin Guerra being like, I'm not a TERF. Here are my views. You can call me a TERF if you want. You're just not going to be correct. And Mars saw that and was like, hey, why don't you come on the podcast? And ever since that first podcast I did, I've been kind of talking to more trans people who are not really towing the line of that ideology. And I can't say I understand why transition has worked for them when it didn't for me. But I definitely do, I guess, respect individual trans people more, even though I don't understand their decisions or their feelings. I have reached the point where I can kind of see them as individuals and just be like, okay, maybe I think what you're doing is not the healthiest thing. Maybe I don't agree with it, but I can still have a conversation with you and not bring up the fact that you're trans every time and try to convert you away, which is kind of the place that I was in before that. Like every trans person needs to be converted to detransitioning.
It seems like you have you're kind of growing out of an evangelical kind of mindset, and by which I mean you have an idea of how the world works, and it's kind of your job to convince other people of that. And it seems like what you described, and please correct me, I don't mean this as a judgment, but you went from a trans ideology to kind of a gender critical ideology, and then you're moving out of that. Or do you find that kind of behavior following you of kind of facing outward and working through your worldview by interacting or convincing or arguing it with other people?
I have definitely functioned that way for a long time, ever since before I even found trans stuff online. I went to a Catholic school. I was super, super religious. I remember like constantly giving my little brother a hard time because he wouldn't pray at night. And so I've kind of functioned in this evangelical way for a pretty long time, for a majority of my life. And now I'm kind of trying to focus on myself and kind of like cleaning up my own room before I try to fix the world, because I don't have all the answers. And like just trying to remember that no matter how much I feel something is right, no matter how much I have rationalized something to be 100% correct, it never is. And there's always those exceptions, and there's always ways in which I don't have a certain perspective or a certain piece of information. So I am trying to consciously keep a distance and not project my worldview onto others.
Do you have any thoughts about why you're like that? And I'm speaking about you, but I think that your personal anecdotal experience would resonate with others. Like, what was the use or the coping mechanism of, projecting your worldview onto other people, you think?
I think it's just when you feel like you don't have any control over your situation, as I very much did throughout my childhood and my adolescence. It becomes very tempting to try to control everyone else and to control the world around you, because you don't have a way of regulating your emotions and your insecurities on the inside. So you kind of have to like control the outside world. And that does also include political and philosophical opinions, because especially as someone like me, who I am really passionate about ideas and the world and stuff, if I feel insecure inside myself, I also feel very insecure about the outside world. There's all this terrible stuff going on. And I have previously felt that if I could just fix the outside world and stop all of this awful stuff from going on, then I wouldn't feel so insecure on the inside.
And that performing that or going through this development that you've gone through with the internet right there, so that it's just sucking up every opinion that you throw into it. And then it reflects it back on you, I guess, or it even captures it for all of eternity. I don't know if you've had, stuff in your past come back at you, but what is it like? Does it feel like you don't have any privacy? Because you've gone from a Tumblr kind of lifestyle. Now you're in Pique Resilience, you're on Twitter. Do you feel like you have a private life, or do you yearn for some part of you or part of your life that is shelter, that doesn't get exposed?
There is definitely a lot of my life that I don't put on Twitter. Not really on purpose, just because I don't feel the need. Like sometimes I'll see people being like, Happy New Year's, here's a picture of my dinner and all of my family sitting together and blah, blah, blah. And I've never felt the need to do that. If I'm with some of my friends, I don't feel the need to post about that online unless like someone makes a funny joke and I think people on Twitter would appreciate it. I'll tweet the joke out of context, but I won't like, I don't know, I don't feel the need to put my daily activities onto Twitter. As for my thoughts about life and like kind of like my musings, I definitely kind of vomit those into Twitter every single day, all the time. But in terms of my daily activities, I do think I do a good job of keeping that private.
So my broader question was that, did you have to develop a sense of privacy? And was that something lacking in your life? Or did you kind of have a line that you had drawn?
I don't think I did it intentionally. I just think I'm in a place now in life where I don't feel like I need to include the Twitter people in everything that I'm doing, because I think unlike when I was on Tumblr, I recognized that this is real life and that's Twitter. Whereas maybe before I thought real life and the internet were kind of the same thing and they intermingled. But I have a better separation of that now. So I just don't feel the compulsion to put everything online.
Speaking of real life, have you guys done, you folks, your Pique Resilience stuff, have you guys done real life events? Have you traveled a bit? Have you met people in person?
Oh my God, yeah. That's kind of a lot of what we've been doing. We've been slacking a little bit on the online content because we've been doing a lot of stuff in real life. About a year ago, we had the Gender Hurts panel in New York City. That was great. We got to meet a lot of great people. Some other detransitioners, not a lot of moms. We recently were in DC in October. That was great. It was about 5 days. We talked to a lot of people in government. We talked to a lot of people in some major health-oriented organizations here in the States, and that was pretty successful. Unfortunately, I can't give a lot of information on that just because a lot of those people... Stuff? No, a lot of the people that we did talk to, they expressed concern that if we were to say online that we talked to them and they agreed with us, that they would get a lot of flack for it.
Oh, interesting. So what do you think is the state then, or what did you learn about the state of policy with regards to transition and detransition on a national level? Were you able to glean kind of insights into where things are at?
Oh, yeah. So in terms of politicians, the meetings we had with politicians were the most disappointing, because they just kind of, it felt like they didn't really care. They just were listening to us because they had to. But in the end, they weren't going to change their position. They weren't really going to take detransitioners into account because, I mean, we have the election coming up and they really need to have their whole partisan thing on fleek. So that was pretty upsetting. But as for health organizations, I got the distinct vibe and even was told explicitly that this is happening, that a lot of the old timers in these organizations are completely at the mercy of ideologues who have infiltrated. So we spoke to one individual from a pretty prominent healthcare organization who is a prominent member of this organization. He has a lot of influence in this organization, or so we thought. He has the title that would have a lot of influence, but he is like completely at the mercy of this committee. And the committee is a relatively new thing, and the committee has all these ideologues on it, and they're the ones who write the guidelines. They're the ones who, decide what information to put on the website. And this individual felt like he was too maybe old and out of touch with like the current climate that is going on to efficiently put the brakes on this, and it kind of got out of control, and now he doesn't have his hands on the reins of this organization or this sector of the organization anymore. And that was particularly scary to me, that these ideologues can just come in and just push these people out who previously had a lot of influence over these organizations and just completely take over.
Mm-hmm.
He completely agreed with us. He had read up on a lot of the trans healthcare, ethical, and medical issues. He was very well versed on it. He was really grateful that we came and talked to him. He offered a lot of advice and a lot of ways to help, but within his organization, there wasn't a lot he could do.
I just recently interviewed GNC Centric, or Ben, up in Canada, and she was speaking kind of off camera. She was speaking about a person that she knows who was trans and then is detransitioned, and the entire medical establishment has no idea how to help this person because everything's geared in one direction. I called it like the Sarlacc pit of gender therapy, or it's all chutes and no ladders. There's no way out. Has that been your personal experience? And have you received input from other people in your situation that's replicated in the United States?
I haven't had a whole lot of experience with this just because I didn't really seek out a whole lot of healthcare after I detransitioned. But of the healthcare that I did seek out, I went back to one of the informed consent clinics that I transitioned under because I wanted some blood tests done because I was feeling just really weird and I wanted to make sure that my hormones were okay. I went in there and I said, I detransitioned, I'm off testosterone, I just want to make sure that my blood tests are going to be okay. And then they were just kind of like, oh, okay, so you're not going to go back on testosterone? And I was like, no, I'm not. And the nurse was just like, oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Let's do this blood test. Yeah. And I was just like, alrighty. And then I went to a primary care physician a little bit after because someone told me I probably should. And I told her a little bit. She was like an older woman. I told her a little bit of what was going on, and I felt like it completely went over her head, and she didn't understand the whole thing about I took testosterone to try to be a man. She was all like, well, you don't look like a man. And I said, yeah, I know. So it's kind of in between. There's like the ideological clinicians who don't want to admit that detransition happens. And I think they kind of like sweep it under the rug, both in their own minds and in their practice. And then there's the people who just like have no idea what's going on, or they're kind of threatened by it. They don't know what to do. So they'll either just, like the one lady I saw, she just kind of was really confused. But I've heard from other people that they'll just get referred back to a gender clinic.
Okay. Yeah. Can you remind me how long you were on testosterone?
17 months.
17 months, so about a year and a half almost. So I guess depending on how deep one goes, that'll translate to how much care they need afterwards. Did you seek out psychological or mental assistance in that? Or were you kind of just on your own the whole time?
I did seek out psychological assistance. So while I was detransitioning, I was seeing this one therapist who I was also seeing while I was transitioning. She worked at a like LGBT resource center here in Chicago. And she was not very like supportive of me detransitioning. She didn't outwardly say don't do it, but she was like, "Oh, we need to explore this. This is very sudden. You've always had such strong dysphoria. We've talked about this dysphoria a lot. We need to explore whether or not this is something your parents pressured you into. Is this internalized transphobia?" So that kind of.
So it is a one-way. From her, it was like kind of a. There's no way out. Like, why would you ever go out?
Exactly. She was very alarmed by the fact that I was thinking about detransitioning. And soon after that, I just stopped seeing her because I didn't want to go into therapy and have her tell me that what I was feeling was not correct, because like what therapist does that? And since then, I've sought out a lot of psychological care, and individual therapists I've had have been sympathetic, but not really understanding of the fact that the desire to transition and gender dysphoria can come out of body image issues and trauma in a similar way to something like an eating disorder can. They don't really understand that. They think it's like, oh, I'm just like the one person who got caught up in it. no one, like that wouldn't happen to anyone else. Everyone else is really trans. I'm just a special case. So they're kind of sympathetic, but they don't really get it.
Mm-hmm. In your adventures in politics, then, with the Pique Resilience Project, have you guys networked with other therapists who are more in the know, or have you seen the beginning of a development of this kind of understanding of what detransition is, or like the likelihood and the process of helping somebody that's going through that?
Yeah, I've spoken to a couple. I spoke to one of the clinicians, a psychologist who resigned from the Tavistock Clinic. I've spoken to her, and I know
that's in the UK, right?
Yeah, that's in the UK. And then Lisa Marciano and Sasha Ayad are both trying to kind of network different mental health care providers that are woke about this. But I haven't personally tried to network anyone.
Have you done any writing about this, essays, or I guess video logs about your transition with regards to your relationship to what you described as gender dysphoria, or called gender dysphoria?
A little bit. I've written basically saying, like, I believe in ROGD. I think it's a thing that happens. I wrote a piece on Lily Maynard's blog about this, and that was probably the first thing I ever wrote. And I also am working on the little series about Tumblr. I've gotten a little bit sidetracked from that, just dealing with personal issues, but I am working on it.
That's the one on Fourth Wave now?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the first one. The first couple. Yeah.
Thank you. There's the second one's out, and I'm working on the third one. But the third one is kind of like a mammoth. I'm trying to explain trans culture on Tumblr, and it is like layers and layers and layers and layers of crazy. And it's really hard to explain it, especially as an outsider now. But yeah, I've done a little bit of writing on it, but not too much, especially on like the kind of therapy I've received. But I would like to. When I get a little bit out of therapy, I think I will look back on it and write on my experience, because it's definitely been weird in regards to gender.
Has it changed over the last year, like your relationship to dysphoria? Or has it turned into something else? Is it still persistent?
I do have dysphoria occasionally. It's not an everyday thing, but yeah, I definitely still experience it here or there. It was really weird. So when I first went into treatment for my eating disorder about 2 months ago, the first like 2 weeks of that, when I had stopped all of my behaviors just like cold turkey, for some reason my gender dysphoria came like roaring back. And I could like, I was just standing in front of the mirror, like thinking like, what is this? Who am I? Like, why do I have this body? What the hell is going on? I felt like I was going insane. But I think it has something to do with just like that coping mechanism and like wanting to control my body and have it be something different than what it is. So I have it still, but one, it's few and far in between, and two, I'm more mindful of it. I'm less controlled by it. So like when it comes up, I'm just like, whoa, that's a feeling, instead of it coming up and me immediately being like, I need testosterone now, I need surgery now.
How do you, what are some of the methods that you use to kind of walk through that when it comes over you? Or even any extreme emotion, but that one in particular?
Just trying to notice it and kind of try to see what my thought pattern was that ended up in like gender dysphoria. Just really being mindful and not taking it as a fact that like I wasn't supposed to be female, I was supposed to be male, I should have these body parts, I shouldn't have these body parts, to not take that as a fact.
And it eventually dissipates then?
Yeah. It's a lot less scary when you don't take it seriously.
Do you see any use in like a community talking about this? One interesting thing about like a community that I've been noticing with regards just in the context of LGBT is that if you have a bunch of people concentrating on an issue, it kind of makes that issue bigger. It doesn't always help to have everybody have a support group that everybody's dealing with the same issue. But have you seen the usefulness of having a community around you speaking about this issue? And what are some of the ways to keep that healthy and beneficial rather than like that pit thing that Tumblr can turn into?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really helpful for detransitioners to kind of get together and discuss these things and share their stories, mostly because there is this narrative that detransition never happens. These thoughts are not things that happen. Doubt does not happen. So you feel really alone when you start having those thoughts and you're thinking like, what is wrong with me? Why isn't this working for me? Why am I not having the right experiences? What have I done wrong? What's wrong with me? And then to have other people say that they've also had that experience kind of lets you know that you're not crazy and there's nothing wrong with you because transition didn't work out, that it's actually kind of a big, and then it's kind of like an issue with the medical establishment, an issue with the ideology, as opposed to something's wrong with you. So I think that aspect is helpful. But I also think, and I'm guilty of this, that there's kind of like a detrans ideology type of thing starting to kind of come up where people have their new views on gender and transition, and they kind of, again, like evangelize about it when you really haven't had that long of a time to process what you just went through and process your own gender dysphoria. And I think it, like when you have strong feelings about something like this, and especially when you feel like you were betrayed by the trans community and the medical establishment, it's really easy to say like, this is what I think now and this is the truth. Before I was deluded, but now I know the truth. It's really easy to do that, but I think we need to not do that. And I think we need to all take a step back and try to like look at what this is before making proclamations about it. And I think that's kind of the danger that the detrans community is running into, but I don't think it's too serious yet. It's not like it's not like the entire detrans community is like this, but I can tell that there are some people, me included in the past, who have been like that. And I think that is probably the biggest danger to it, because it prevents us from really knowing the truth and really discovering what is behind all these things. If we already know that people transition because of patriarchy, how are we going to be open to other reasons why people might be transitioning and help those people? I think that's...
There's, for a certain person, I'm not saying entirely, and I want to diverse this from sexuality or any identity, but certain forms of the LGBT community as a community, and this is replicated in any community that has a certain belief system where the members are formed and speaking around kind of the same topic. There's orthodoxy. Wherever there's an orthodoxy, that orthodoxy attracts vulnerable people who need armor, people who need scaffolding, people who need order in their life. Yeah. And they glom onto that. So when they leave that, they might be twice as vulnerable when they go out there. And radicalism is a way of projecting vulnerability onto the world. It's a way of acting big and loud as if you know things because you don't. And to be mindful of that vulnerability, it's very difficult. So there will be, I think there will be residual orthodoxies in a detrans kind of, any kind of what's it called when you get on deprogramming place. There will be people who need to be weaned off of that radicalism, weaned off of that fundamentalism, weaned off of that evangelicalism, and kind of get towards that really vulnerable space where they can build themselves up properly from the ground floor up.
Yeah, agreed.
So just being mindful of that might be useful or helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to you for this talk, one, because I really enjoyed our interview and I wanted to get you back on, but you were talking on Twitter about the gender critical thing, and I like that you're somebody who you want to be in between things. You're like, okay, well, I don't agree with this group, I don't agree with that group, and that stance, it shows the a willingness to be free, be independent, and also kind of be vulnerable too, to get crap from all these different sides. What do you think is your motivation for standing apart from these different, what you perceive as group thinking or orthodoxies?
Part of it is just never wanting to be like that again, because I was super, super, super into trans ideology. And when I detransitioned and I immediately got so much love from rad femmes, it was really, really intoxicating to me because, like you said, I was twice as vulnerable. So to have this new community like embrace me with loving arms as long as I interpreted my experience the correct way, that was really intoxicating. And when I realized that is what was happening, it really freaked me out. And I was like, oh my God, I have to make such an active attempt to not do that. I have to really consider everything I think from now on, because it's so easy to fall into that. I think that is definitely part of it. And then the other thing is just, I'm really passionate about solving this issue, and I'm passionate about other girls like me who have mental health issues and abuse histories from getting sucked into this trans pipeline. And I don't think that coming up with another ideology that explains everything is going to accurately account for the diversity of people that are getting caught up in this and the unique experiences that result in body hatred and gender dysphoria. And I think that it's going to be doing a lot of people a disservice, and the entire movement a disservice, to close ourselves off from additional perspectives and additional information. So it's really like my passion for solving this issue, that I don't want to be radical against this issue, that I want to be balanced and I want to be open to information.
When you moved away from the gender critical community, maybe, or just the mindset, did you notice your behavior had changed? Did you have to lose a bunch of friends? Did you end up having to give up everything? Were there different tactics that you used, or was the community, the GC community, more open to being flexible with you? Were they as kind of policing their community based on belief, or was it less so?
At first, it felt like less so, because all I had known for the last 5 years was trans ideology. So to have any community that was open to criticizing that felt like freedom. But the more involved I got, the more I noticed that if you, like, I don't know, I would just be on YouTube and I would find a video of, I don't know, somebody talking about some issue. And I'd be like, wow, that's a really good point. And then I would go post about it on Twitter, and a bunch of rad femmes would come up and be like, no, that's not right. That's not true. That's not right. That's not true. And I kind of just noticed, like, wow, it's the same thing. So even though at the beginning it felt like freedom, once I kind of was not fresh out of trans ideology, I recognized that it has a lot of the same behaviors. They might not be as powerful financially or politically as the trans community, but it's not like you can disagree with them.
Do you feel homeless, or do you feel like that there is somewhere for you to be, some group or coalition or even a religion or a philosophy, even Stoicism? Do you feel that there's something out there for you, or do you feel like that you're a part of something that you can call your home as a worldview, or that you can share with other people?
Right now, there really isn't. I definitely feel kind of like caught in between on everything. Like every issue that I'm interested in, I'm very in between. And maybe in the future, there will be something that appeals to me like that, where I can kind of identify myself as part of that group. But I honestly don't know if I really want there to be. I don't know if I am part of a group like that in the future. It needs to be a group that is open to disagreement, because I really don't want to just follow something blindly ever again, because that really got me into trouble.
Do you think you'll go back to college at some point?
I think about it, but I guess I'm hesitant, one, because it's so expensive. I just don't think that the education that you get is worth $40,000 to $60,000. I was talking about this to a friend earlier. I said, like, if I'm going to be paying $60,000, I better be going to Hogwarts, not just like some silly school that's going to teach me about critical race theory. So as for right now, I'm just trying to increase my knowledge base by just reading on my own. And maybe in the future, when I kind of know what my career path is going to be, I might consider going back to school. But I definitely don't have the same perspective on college that I used to. That, like, you go to college and you get educated, then you get a job. Kind of how I used to see it. But now it's just like, it's really flawed and it's not worth it if it ever becomes a lot cheaper and a lot higher standards, maybe I'll consider it. But for right now, I'm not really interested.
What is your topic that you're investigating right now, other than the trans stuff? Or, I mean, even like, are you looking into psychology or something that's related to that, going forward through that?
Yeah, I really like psychology. That's kind of history and psychology are kind of my favorite topics. Right now, I'm reading the book "The Body Keeps the Score" by Bessel van der Kolk. It's a really awesome book. I feel like everyone needs to read it. But
What's it about?
it's about trauma, different traumatic events, or even just like adverse events can affect you in ways that are physical as well as psychological, and how like those physical effects can keep you trapped in like these negative psychological patterns because you're not addressing the physical parts. And he goes through a lot of science and a lot of information and 30 years of his own research. And it's just been like pretty revolutionary in the way that I look at my own mental health. But I think it's pretty crucial because I think a majority of the population has at least had some kind of adverse childhood experience or relational issues in the family. And I think if we could be more compassionate with that and more understanding of how that functions neurologically, psychologically, physiologically, we would be more able to solve a lot of problems because we would be kind of understanding why some people act the way they do.
Mm-hmm. The mechanisms behind behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm very interested in kind of how critical theory came about. It's very overwhelming, and I feel like it's hard to know what is true and what is not, because a lot of it is just people's own perspectives on how it came about. But I am really interested in it. I'm looking forward to James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose's, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, book that's coming out, Cynical Theories, I think it's called. Really looking forward to that.
So yeah, that's pretty soon. A couple months, maybe.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for that. And I like history. I'm reading or listening to a book on the Dark Ages. It's called A World Lit by Fire. It's really good.
Sounds romantic.
Yeah, right? It's great. I'm only in the beginning, and they're talking about the fall of the Roman Empire. And it's really interesting, like comparing the fall of the Roman Empire to kind of like where Western society is right now, because it's like all the bureaucracy, like the hyper, like tribalism that was going on, just kind of higher ups and people in power brushing stuff under the rug. Everyone gets lazy. Everyone gets so focused on winning whatever they're winning or losing at. It's really interesting.
What's next for the desisted cis sisters of the Pique Resilience Project?
I am starting my own interview series for PRP. I'm really excited. I'm going to have Laura on. I'll give you her Twitter username so you can maybe put that in the description. But she's really great. She detransitioned like 10 years ago. So she was
she'll be on my show in a couple of weeks, yeah.
Really?
She's in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, she is. I thought her story was really captivating and just like pretty incredible that she survived what she did without the community support that we are building right now. So I think she has a lot to say for us younger people who are going through that. So I'm really excited for that. And we are researching a little bit about the links between PCOS and gender dysphoria, because Price, the newest member of our squad, has PCOS, and it kind of like polycystic ovarian syndrome. It can cause increased levels of testosterone in females, and Price was describing how this affected the way she looked, which affected the way she kind of like stood out amongst other girls and made her feel like she wasn't one of them and like she was meant to be a guy because she had higher levels of testosterone and looked different. And I think there is some research linking trans men to PCOS. and gender dysphoria in females to this disorder. So we're kind of looking into that, and we're probably going to be making a video about that soon, but we're kind of like in the research stages of that.
Oh, cool. Excellent. If you don't mind me asking, do you think of your gender dysphoria or your body dysmorphia as socially constructed or put upon you by society, magazines, etc., media, or is it like internal? Do you see it as more of an internal thing that came from inside of you?
Neither. I think both are due to a lot of issues that were going on in my family.
Okay. So it's a complex interplay of those things.
Yeah, like in short, like very short, my mom is super obsessed with weight and beauty and image. And she just kind of like very forcefully instilled in me that my body was wrong. I need to fix it, change it. And, like trans just seemed like a good explanation. Like gender dysphoria seemed like a good explanation for why I didn't like certain body parts. So it's kind of like neither.
Do you think that in your speaking with other people that gender dysphoria is too complex to have a cultural origin or a psychological origin? It's always going to be a mixture of the two. Do you think that society, media in general, pushes too much pressure on women to act and look a certain way, and that leads them to acting upon themselves with, I guess, just the trans stuff or any other body modification?
I think there's going to be social aspects to most people's gender dysphoria, especially in the case of gay men and lesbian women who develop gender dysphoria. Just from the accounts that I've heard, they are pretty clear and concise in their experiences growing up as gay or lesbian, being bullied for it, wishing that they could be the opposite sex so that they could have the relationships they want and look the way they want without this persecution, which is very real. But I think that there is also a subset of people who are more like me, where it's more psychological. And I do think part of it was social. Like, I never fit in with other girls. There was always something weird about me. I don't know if that's just because of how I am or if it was because I was a troubled kid growing up, but there's always been something different. I'm not sure how much of that is social or how much of that is internal, but I do think that it's a mixture of both for most people. I don't think anyone is either purely social or purely internal.
Mm-hmm. Do you still feel weird? Like you stick out? How do you feel about that?
I'm trying to appreciate it. I'm trying to appreciate my differences, but I've spent a lot of time in my life hating myself for those differences, so it's hard to get over that. But I'm trying to.
Self-care.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for me, Helena?
How the hell do you make the screen split?
Oh yeah, we needed to talk about your podcast stuff. Did you still need tech advice on that? Or did you figure it all out?
I haven't really looked into it since I read your message. Okay. I read your message and I was like, because you said that I'm going to have to work with the program. And I was like, no. So I just kind of stopped looking at it. But I told myself tonight that I would look into the software that you sent me and try to figure it out. And if not, I will probably ask you more questions.
Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap it up then. Could you say goodbye to the listener?
Bye, listeners.
Okay, that's cool. It's good to stop the recording now.